Welcome to Relentless Truth with John Warren, the podcast that extracts truth from a wide range of topics, revealing who God is, who we are, and how we relate to each other. Now, here's John with this week's powerful and practical insights.
Welcome to Relentless Truth. I'm John Warren. It is good to be with you again. Please like, share, review, and subscribe to Relentless Truth. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please also go to our website, John Warren Media, for more information about our work. You can send a comment there to me that I will receive via email, or you can send an email directly to me at john@johnwarrenmedia.com. I would be delighted to hear from you, and I would just ask that you, if you enjoy this podcast, if you appreciate this content week after week, that you share it with friends. You have helped to spread the word on this podcast, and it is humbling that here we are near the end of year 4, and still every week I'm hearing about new listeners and the value of some of the content that we share. It's humbling, and it's an honor to get to do that. Well, today we're going to do something just a little different. It's been a few months now, a couple months, from just over a couple months from President Trump's election to a second 4-year term. And if you're like a lot of people I know, you're kind of trying to figure out what he's up to. And if you're a true conservative, then you're probably relieved that the Biden administration is over. And you're probably also relieved that Kamala Harris didn't get elected. I share those views with you. I think that would have been awful had she been elected. And we're beginning to learn about many of the things that went on and didn't go on during the Biden presidency. And it's just a mess. When you look beyond President Trump's name calling and hyperbole, we're beginning to learn that, we just learned yesterday, for example, and I released these episodes several weeks after I record them, but you'll remember this event. We just learned yesterday that there was a room in the executive office building that has a big teleprompter, and President Biden used that as kind of it was sort of a set sort of looking thing that he used in lieu of inviting the press into the Oval Office. President Trump's kind of done just the opposite. He's invited the press, and I've seen some pictures of their side of the room into the actual Oval Office. And sometimes he says things that are a little out there. Sometimes he goes too far. Sometimes he's cruel. But principally, I agree with a lot of the things that he's doing. And I don't usually give, political opinions on this podcast. I don't want to lose you if you're following along in our study of theology and you disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. I have some dear friends who are much more liberal than me politically, and we're friends. Our friendship has roots that go beyond those things. I don't have many of them, but I do have some. And I was just amazed. There was a scene a couple of weeks ago in the Oval Office where Elon Musk is standing there next to the Resolute desk, and Trump and they're with Trump and President Trump, and they're talking to the press. And Elon's son is there, and you probably saw this. And Elon puts him up on his shoulders during the discussion, and he's talking about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and how they have 100 very smart people who are exploring waste, abuse, and fraud, and all that stuff, and cutting things and all. And I think that's a very good thing that we're doing that. It's long overdue. It's going to have some pain associated with it. There's no question about that. And I we can use all the analogies we care to use to explain this, but I would say, instead of a wrecking ball, use a scalpel where you can. The Democrats are all, Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren. They're all making claims that are crazy, like Trump has cut Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. He's done no such thing. Or that he's taking school lunches away from kids. Nope, hasn't happened. So I would just urge you, look at the facts. Don't fall for this nonsense. I can help you with good news sources if you care. I like Newsmax a lot right now. I also still like the Wall Street Journal, even though some of their editorial opinions are drifting toward the liberal side of things. I still find them to be valuable. But this is this administration is really upsetting this deep state, the bureaucratic state that we have. And Elon Musk said something that I thought was brilliant, and that is, we don't have if this continues, we won't have a democracy, we'll have a bureaucracy. And, ours is a republic. It's a representative form of government. We don't all vote on all the laws, so it's not a pure democracy, but we do have a democratic process. What is really interesting, two things I want to talk about today that really interest me. One is I want to know how all the money flows. I know that people like Nancy Pelosi, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and others, many of them became wealthy while in office, wealthier in some cases, substantially wealthier. And I know they get to buy stocks and things that they think will benefit from legislation. They shouldn't be able to, but they do that sort of thing. They've got all this crony stuff that goes on. And I understand all of that. I understand that with political power, you can advantage yourself, apparently, financially. And I'm guessing there are some who don't participate in all that, who don't do that. But they all benefit, from being a member of Congress, whether it's House or Senate. And that's been the case for many years. And it happens on both sides of the aisle. But this USAID story, USAID funding that Elon Musk has uncovered, and you've heard the stories about some of the absolutely absurd things that they're sponsoring. I think they do some good work too, and I have some liberal friends who are really upset about some of those cuts. But I think the government, our government in the United States, has used NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to fund things that the government itself, to do some things that the government itself couldn't directly do, that wouldn't be legal for the government to do. And I just wonder, and I'm wondering right out loud here on a well listened to podcast, but I just wonder if there's a connection between funding those NGOs and these members of Congress who are receiving, whose wealth is growing while they're in office. Is there a back door? Is there a back channel to them? And the answer might be no. But I have to wonder, because I look at Elizabeth Warren, for example, and I know we don't know her exact net worth, but the reports by some credible people say that she's worth $95 million and she came into office with not a lot of money, not a huge net worth. I just wonder how that happened. I'm not looking to get all in their business, these people who do this, but I'm looking to understand conceptually, how does that happen? The average American cannot do that, cannot grow their wealth. You might accumulate a few $1 million. By God's grace, that happened to us over the course of a long careers in banking and medicine, and you might do okay. Yeah, you might have enough to retire and live well, and travel a little and feel reasonably comfortable that your needs are met. I understand all that, and I have many friends who've done quite well. I know some who've done well and then made dumb decisions. We all have, but there's kind of a set of parameters. There's sort of a standard distribution for these things, and you sort of, you look at some people and go, wow, you took a lot of risk and you got a good return and all of that. Well, this goes so far beyond that. the wealth that has been accumulated by some people, that I have to pause. And I'm not just obsessed over, they advantage themselves. I think in a free country with a free market economy, with caveat emptor and caveat vendor in place, I think, there's a risk return continuum, and you can, if you're smart, you work hard and you study it, you can make a lot of money. And I'm totally fine with that. I don't begrudge Warren Buffett's money, or George Soros's money for that matter, or any number of other people. I think Zuckerberg and friends, I think those are fine stories. And Bill Gates and all the stuff, the risk that he took. Steve Jobs, what a story, up and down financially for decades, and then hits the home run with the iPhone and related peripherals. And created incredible generational wealth for many, many people. And so, and Tim Cook continues that. And I think all of those stories are wonderful and can happen in America. But I smell a rat, to borrow Patrick Henry's words. I smell a rat with the flow of the funding. And I always look at irrational human behavior, this squealing that is going on, this irrational, we don't like Elon Musk and what he's accomplishing. We don't want him to look anymore. We're uncomfortable with this. He wasn't elected, they say, which is just insulting to our intelligence. Thousands of people work for the government. Millions work for the government, for the executive branch, who are absolutely not elected. So, the president has all kinds of advisors that aren't elected. For that matter, the Secretary of State is not elected. He's confirmed by the Senate in their advice and consent role to the president. That's spelled out in Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and it's just fine. It's how it's designed. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, not voted on by the people. There are all kinds of powerful people in government who weren't voted on by the people. But and all this squealing about, oh my goodness, you're cutting this, and they're lying about what is actually being cut. And I think that Trump administration got out in front of its skis a little bit and slashed some things and sent some people home, and then went, maybe we need those people. Maybe there's some good people in those big cuts. I think they were kind of going for impact, and I've done that with company cuts before. You're looking to get everybody on board with making things efficient, and you can go too far too fast, and some of these programs aren't all that well thought out when you cut them. You have to sometimes sort of retrench. But this administration is doing well. They're doing good things. I'm going to talk about, for most of our time today, I'm going to talk about another thing they're not doing well in. But I'm really comfortable and happy with this cutting. And Elon Musk says it in such a fresh way. I really like it. I want to go buy a Tesla now. You've heard about all the vandalism happening to their dealerships and people who own their cars. I'm inclined to buy one. And I've started researching it yesterday. And when we talk in a few months, I might be a Tesla owner, my wife and I. I'm not sure. I mocked them at first years ago. And we have some friends who drive one, several friends who drive them, and they're having a really good experience. So, but there's this backlash against all of these cuts, and Elon Musk has this fresh approach when he talks about it. And he says something I've said to my students many, many times. My generation, our generations, I'm talking to boomers and the next couple of generations, have stolen from Gen Z and these new generation, young people, and saddled them with 35 trillion plus. And I'm not going to bore you today with it, but I would argue 150 trillion if you look at all the unfunded obligations of the United States government, at least 100 trillion, at least 100 trillion. And I know that kind of knocks you out of your chair. Keep the car on the road if you're driving, but 100 trillion is a real number. Unfunded Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other programs, the interest on the debt, and all the rest. If you just look at it objectively, we have stolen. Our Congress people have been irresponsible and have stolen from future generations, have put future generations in a terrible place. And Musk kind of says, what in the world are we doing? I mean, why in the world wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't everybody support this? And I agree. There might be some pain. We just heard a story that President Biden used an auto pen. I think I know what that is. It's one that simulates his actual signature digitally, and he used that to sign everything except his real signature went on the document where he dropped out of the race last summer, the presidential race last summer after the disastrous debate that he had. All the other documents were, staff pressing a button. Now, did they do it the right way? Did they consult with him? Was he alert enough? I think there was a huge cover up that is just gonna continue to come out. There are people who are finally beginning to tell the truth. We've got some smart people now in the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA, those watchdog organizations. They're all on this topic, but I have said for 20 years, and so if you go back and look, maybe 30 years even, we've had our fair share of Republicans in office as well, and I've said, why isn't anybody caring about the budget? Why is the last time we balanced the budget the Clinton administration, when there was a Republican Congress, and Bill Clinton had to work with them and did, to his credit, and to the credit of people like Newt Gingrich and Bill McCollum, who's a friend of mine, and others. My goodness, we did the right thing. But why is that the last time we had a balanced budget? That doesn't mean address the debt in any way whatsoever. It means stopped adding to the debt for a short season. Why in the world don't we do that now? We have to do that. There's no way to do it without pain. If you look at the entitlements and all the other things, we are going to have pain in addressing this. This Elon Musk Doge team, which has 100 and it's headed to 200, I think, really smart people working on it, is the beginning. It's the tip of the spear toward addressing fraud, abuse, and waste in government. And we must do it, even if it doesn't balance the budget. And President Trump has proposed a new budget that'll get us through the end of the fiscal year, September 30. And we haven't had one in ages. We've been dealing with continuing resolutions. And I would say it's a credit to the Congress and a credit to his administration that they're going to pass, apparently today, this legislation. But it's just the beginning. I don't want to see those checks. They're talking about Doge, their work and their savings being passed on to the American people, and these checks that go to the American. No, we can't afford that as a country. We've got to address the deficit and then ultimately address the debt. And there's a guy I've talked about on the podcast before named Art Laffer, who has a curve and he developed, and what it shows very clearly is that government revenue goes up when we cut taxes a little bit, when we cut it to the right number. There's an equilibrium point that it's not the heaviest the heaviest marginal tax rates that we've employed as a country are too heavy, and they hinder economic development. That's the Laffer curve in short. So there's a way to cut taxes a little, and no, it's not President Trump helping his rich friends, and Congress will see to it that it's not, but there are some tax cuts that would be stimulative to the economy, therefore accretive to our effort to balance the budget. You have to grow your way out of a bad economy and out of this horrible debt situation that we're in. Well, there's something that concerns me that the Trump administration is doing. And so I wanted just to give you that backdrop for almost 20 minutes and then spend a little bit of time talking about something that concerns me. And it's something I've talked about on this podcast before. I have likened the period that we're in right now to the roaring 20s, that is the 1920s, this early 20th century phenomenon. And I think it's easy to see, and I'm not alone in this. I didn't copy somebody else. I teach all this stuff, and as I go through the history of the economy, it just leaps off the page at me that what is actually happening today with this huge rise in consumer credit, this funding everything on credit. The average, I don't have the data in front of me, but the average American household has a ton of debt and is borrowing money now to buy things. I saw an ad, and I wanted to throw something at the television. I saw an ad for this home equity loan program, and it had all the uses. This guy's talking, I can't remember the company, but it was, we make it easy for you. Just click here and boom, you're done. And it was, buy a jet ski, buy a boat, buy a whatever else, new appliance, whatever. And I thought, that ad made it sound like you don't have to pay it back. It's incredible. But consumers now are struggling. We've had the bird flu thing, and the price of eggs has gone up. I was talking to my daughter. She and her husband are precious, and they're both working hard in their second year of marriage, and their careers are young, and they're doing everything they can do. And she said, we don't buy eggs right now. And I wanted to send her a check and offered to, and as always, she refused. But it's tough for some people. It's tough for some of you. And I know you don't go talking about that, but to your friends probably because you have some pride. But this is a difficult time, and I think people are depending on credit cards. I saw a few months ago where credit card debt went over $1 trillion for the first time in history, and I look at, okay, we survived COVID. And I liken that to the Spanish flu in the early 20th century, early 1900s. And then I think about the World War I, and we're maybe going to wrap up the Ukraine-Russia conflict soon, I hope. We kind of settled down in the Middle East a little bit, and it seems like we're getting past some bad things globally in that regard. I'm not confident of that, but I just see a parallel to this period in the early 1900s. And then we've got innovation, and they had innovation. It didn't feel like our innovation, but they had electricity in the home and started buying appliances and things and doing things more efficiently. And we've got AI and all the things that go with it. And just our smartphones even. I mean, if you're over 40 years old, you remember a time we didn't have them, and now we really depend on them. But the technology that we all experience is amazing. I will tell you that my overview of Lexus is that they are an incredible software company. Their cars do some amazing things. This autonomous driving, that's what I call it. They call it something else, but it is incredible. Their battery management systems are incredible. They have figured some things out, and I'll let you know as this process goes forward what we end up doing there. But we're at a time where it seems like every day there's something new from a technology standpoint. You might have noticed that your Google searches now have an AI answer. You might have used ChatGPT. There are others. It's amazing how much information you can get your hands on quickly. It's not always great information, but we're in a time that rivals that 1920s period. Well, President Trump the Trump administration is doing something that I find incredibly alarming. And that also parallels 1930. And you probably just gasped because you know that somewhere around 1929, 1930 is the starting place for the Great Depression. I'm not predicting a Great Depression. I've been predicting a big economic downturn for over a decade now. And I don't just do that frivolously. I look at all of the data and the pattern, and I look at our distance from 2008 when we last had a downturn, and I understand the cyclical economy. And I'm glad to talk to you more about that. If you have an interest in that and want me to do some more episodes on that, send along a message. I'm happy to do it. I've done it in the past. And I'm not this doom and gloom guy. I see a silver lining on most aspects of the economy as well. The employment situation is awfully good. We just got inflation numbers that weren't bad at all. The interest rate environment seems to have settled down. So I see some good things happening. But President Trump is engaging us, and I think with really good intentions, in a trade war. And he just tariffs. And most recently, he is taxing liquor from Europe now, which might be an inconsequential one, but he is going to war with Canada and Mexico over trade, not physical, military war, but a trade war. And he's announcing reciprocal tariffs that go into effect with a bunch of countries on April 2nd, which will have already transpired when you hear this episode. He's saying his hyperbole is off the charts with respect to tariffs. He's saying that he's going to do a lot more than he's doing, but he's doing as well. And I hate to tell you, but he's going to make things more expensive. You can call it transitory inflation or whatever you want to call it, but the cost of things is going up, are going up. And brace for impact, because if we get into a trade war, and that's what happened in 1930. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was signed by Herbert Hoover on June 17th of 1930, and it dramatically raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. And it created international retaliation, which I'm starting to hear toward the Trump administration. Now, let's pull back just for a second and let's think about his intentions. I think they're very good. He is concerned that we don't make enough stuff here in the United States. We don't make enough things. We import prescription drug material, prescription drugs themselves from China. China has decided to be a world leader on antibiotics, for example. And we are very dependent on them for antibiotics. We are also dependent on other nations, plus China, for computer chips. If you bought a car in the last 5 years, particularly if you bought it 2, 3, 4 years ago, you might have experienced, because of the supply chain disruptions, something like this. Either all of your electronic features didn't work fully, and they promised you, they gave you one of those little IOUs that they owed you a chip, and then it came in later and you had to take it into the dealership and they installed it and now everything works. Or they withheld a key. They had to ration the keys because they have chips in them. And so all of that revealed, and those are just a couple of examples, but there are many more, that we are dependent on this international supply chain. And President Trump is deeply concerned about that. And I get it. He wants to favor American business. He's trying to bring back some of our automobile industry has left towns like Detroit and towns in Ohio and Indiana, and he wants to bring them back, and Illinois, and he wants to bring them back, and I think that's great. He doesn't want us to be dependent on foreign countries. He doesn't want us to give aid to foreign countries where we don't have some sort of reciprocating benefit, some sort of quid pro quo, and I like that too. I think we've been outsourcing. So I had my students do something last week that I'll tell you about. I had them check their shoes. We all checked our shoes while we were in economics class to see where they're made. You know where they were made? China, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Vietnam. I think those are all the country names I heard. There was not one pair of shoes among 50 students in 3 sections of that class that had American-made shoes. So, I'm not saying, the world's going to shut us off and not, can't buy shoes. But if all these tariffs go into place, if we do have reciprocal tariffs, then we're going to be paying more for shoes, and we're going to pay more for everything. I mean, Thomas Sowell did did an interview with on Uncommon Knowledge, and he's a Hoover Institute fellow, as you know, and he said, this was during the first Trump administration. He was all worked up over this tariff issue because President Trump was saying some of these things, and then President Trump got knee deep in all kinds of other issues and didn't really do this, but now he's doing it. And Sol said, I don't care about our trade balance, and I don't either. We have a trade deficit when we import more than we export. We have a trade surplus when we export more than we import. And all things equal, is it nice to have a trade surplus? Oh, sure, it is. But it's not the end of the world if we don't. It doesn't really matter to the economy. What really matters is, can we make these things that are, we've got some critical life critical products and that we should be making enough of here. You probably thought of oil. I didn't mention oil. We don't want to be oil dependent on other countries, and President Biden set us back a couple of decades with some decisions he made. He also caused this, by the way, I'll just say it plainly. Bird flu didn't cause this rise in egg prices. President Biden did by ordering the killing of a bunch of birds as an abundance of caution. Government often, brings in the wrecking ball when they needed a scalpel, and that's what happened there. But anyway, back to the point. The point is that when you start these tariffs, and it sounds good to say, yeah, reciprocal tariffs are great. I want to propose something to you. I want to ask you to think about this. I don't want to make you angry, but how does China produce things? How does that part of the world that I just named, with all the shoe imports that we get, how do they do it so cost effectively compared to us? And you might be one of those people that gets on those websites, that it's like a portal for American-made stuff, and you might be willing to pay more. You might be willing and able. I'm able but not willing, but I do lean toward, if all things equal, I would buy from an American company versus another something made in another country. But yet you might just think about this. China does this. These other countries are able to do this to make things more cost effectively because they don't have our laws in place. They don't have our way of life. They don't have our ethics. They don't have our morality. They don't have our biblical word righteousness. They employ children in factories in that part of the world, and they don't think anything of it. They might treat them well even, but by the time, and I know this for a fact, I have firsthand knowledge of several people who've lived in those cultures. Several people, not that they don't even know each other, and they tell me the same thing. That when a kid is about 7 years old, and it varies with the kid, but when they have enough dexterity, they can go to work in a factory. They don't all do that, but it's a path they can choose or gets chosen for them. And they don't get paid a lot, and it saves money. And then another thing you might not have thought of is the rest of the world is polluting the earth like there's no tomorrow. They don't have the same standards that we do. And then there's a third group so they save money in the manufacturing process. And then there's a third group that has all kinds of human rights violations. And so who knows how they produce things cost effectively. Some of those countries that are just hideous violators of human rights, egregious violators of human rights, we won't do business with. Think Iran and Syria when I say that. You're not going to find Iranian shoes or Syrian shoes. But the playing field, the world's stage, the environment morally, and with all these things like pollution, like child labor, like working conditions, they don't have an OSHA that requires all these extra buttons to keep your hands out of the way of the process. They don't get obsessed over the width of doors and railing and all the stuff. If you've manufactured something, all the U.S. rules. We call it red tape. It can be extensive, and so I just think it's important to think about this. We pay tariffs on goods that we send to China. We subsidize China, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and other countries. We do. Taiwan too. And it's not to disparage those countries, but it's almost like we outsource our manufacturing because we're not comfortable morally doing some things like polluting the earth and having child labor. I'm grossly oversimplifying, but you get the idea. So we're outsourcing those things so that we can buy cheap stuff. And President Trump isn't going to fix that. That's just how the world economy works. And unless there's some way to prompt these other countries to clean all that up, this will forever be a problem. There are U.S. manufacturers, and you may know some, who send their partially completed goods to China or other countries to have them finished and sent back to us because of this labor and manufacturing cost-saving issue. We can't compete structured the way we are. And I'm not arguing that we look the other way with occupational safety and health and all that. I'm not arguing that we employ children to do things. I'm not arguing that we pollute the earth. I'm just telling you other people do all those things. Other countries do all those things. So we're outsourcing our manufacturing. And if you really want to see it, go in one of those little shops, kind of a big chain of shops that I can't think of any right now. I think Pier 1 comes to mind. They may be closed now, or I think they went through bankruptcy. But what a store like that, and look at where everything's made, or just walk around your house and look. All the knickknacks and lamps and things are not made for the most part in the U.S. because we morally sort of look the other way and say, well, this works better for us. And it's just how the global economy works. Well, Smoot-Hawley did not end well. Protectionism doesn't work well. Quotas and sanctions don't work well. Ask Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter. Or if you were alive back then, you remember the lines for oil, the price freezes that they tried. You can't artificially interfere with supply and demand equilibrium that is driven by price finding its equilibrium point. Just like you can't change the tide of the ocean. There are natural laws at play in the economy that you can't impact. So it was intended, Smoot-Hawley, if you've never heard of it, feel free to look it up. It's SMOOT-HAWLEY, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It was intended to protect American farmers primarily and industries from foreign competition. It sounded like a good idea. President Trump sounds just like Herbert Hoover did during this time. And what happened? Well, primarily major trading partners like Canada, France, and Britain imposed taxes on American exports. And everybody kept upping their ante. Our exports dropped over 60% from 1929 to 1933. Farm prices fell drastically. Unemployment rose. It deepened, government action deepened and extended the Great Depression, delaying what would have been a cyclical recovery. If you haven't heard that before, look it up. So there was an act in 1934, thankfully, the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act, that started reversing these crazy tariffs. Eventually, the World Trade Organization was formed. I'm not advocating for the World Trade Organization. I'm just telling you that we've been here and we've done this, and it didn't end well. In fact, I'm going to argue that Smoot-Hawley might have caused some of the things you think about when you think of the Great Depression. Young people, some of the things you study when you study the Great Depression might have, I believe, were caused by Smoot-Hawley. You can't take a free market, or in our case of our world today, a semi-free market, and put all kinds of restrictions on it and have it function normally. It won't. If you tinker with supply and demand, you're going to impact prices. I would urge the Trump administration, not that they listen to me, to stop it, to be more methodical, to be kinder and gentler. Don't do the midnight tomorrow, I'm slapping a 20% tax on you. There are some good aspirations that this administration has. They want people to, they want Mexico to enforce the border. They want Mexico and Canada to limit the drug flow into the United States. Those are wonderful. But you can't just apply the wrecking ball and make them hate you, because they're going to announce reciprocal tariffs, and what we're engaging in is lose-lose politics, lose-lose governance, lose-lose polity. Can't be done. And this economy is teetering. Who knows where the stock market will be when you hear this, but as I speak, we've had a rough week or two. I mean, we've still got plenty of room before it's a full-fledged correction, but we're on our way if we're not careful to. And then you'll have asset valuations that will all adjust, and people are already struggling. We cannot do things. We cannot, through trade, through tariffs, and through trade agreements that are restrictive, through trade policy with quotas and those kinds of things. We can't artificially stifle the market because prices in our country are free and will move upward. And we can't do that. This economy, the American people can't afford that. We talked at the beginning of this episode about consumer credit and the national debt. Those things in a higher interest rate environment become much more expensive. And then you'll have defaults, and that'll stress the banking system. And I'm not a gloom and doom guy, but we should exercise extreme caution. Now, I would imagine that people are telling President Trump this. He's got some people around him who I really respect, who know everything we've talked about today and more. So I have hope. My eternal hope is in our Savior, Jesus Christ our Lord. My eternal hope is in God himself, who is sovereign over all of these things. And I rest in him, and I know you rest in him. And that is precisely what we should do. But we're also to be stewards of this earth and resources. And those things aren't in conflict. They work together beautifully. God's sovereignty and man's volition work together beautifully. And so, Trump administration, be careful, be methodical. Elon Musk, keep rocking on. Keep doing what you're doing. Apply a scalpel. Be careful. Use a small knife, not a wrecking ball, but make the changes. Congress is beginning to have hearings, and they're beginning to say, well, maybe we should cut. I can't wait to hear how the backdoor money comes to some of them. I think there's some good reporters out there who are beginning to kind of get an idea how this works. I think you're going to see some interesting articles, interesting books, interesting editorials. So stay tuned. It's an exciting time. I like about 80-90% of the things the Trump administration is doing. I hope they end by the time you hear this. I hope the war in Ukraine is ended. I hope Hamas has released all the terrorists. I hope the world is a safer, more peaceful, more economically healthy place soon. And I hope we address our budget deficits and our national debt for the sake of younger generations. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, don't hesitate to send an email to me at john@johnwarrenmedia.com. I am glad to hear from you. You can go to our website, johnwarrenmedia.com, and send along comment on our contact form. Don't hesitate to do that either. Please share this episode with your friends. I hope it's been measured and methodical, but meaningful, weighty. It really concerns me, these topics that we've talked about today. There's so much more to say. We've just scratched the surface. I have not even scratched the surface on my notes for this episode. We'll follow up with some more down the road. Next week, we go back to our series on the preeminence of Christ. Praise God, he is preeminent, and we can rest in him. I look forward to being with you again next time.
Thanks for listening to Relentless Truth with John Warren. Please consider sharing this podcast and subscribe to receive future episodes. Connect with John regarding your comments, questions, and show ideas through johnwarrenmedia.com or at John Warren Media on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. That's all for this episode. Join us next week for another edition of Relentless Truth with John Warren.